What if tomorrow the sun decided to strike? Not with warmth, not with light, but with fire. An invisible storm powerful enough to rip through satellites, melt power grids, and plunge every city on Earth into silence. No phone calls, no internet, no banks, no planes in the sky. In a single moment, the heartbeat of modern civilization stops. It sounds like science fiction, but it isn't. In 1859, the world was hit by such a storm. Back then, it only set telegraphs on fire. If the same thing happened today, it would erase the digital world we've built in less than a heartbeat. Imagine looking out your window at night and seeing not neon, not streetlights, but only stars, and an aurora blazing overhead like a cosmic warning. Imagine waking the next morning to realize the silence isn't temporary, it's permanent. This is not a what-if we can ignore. It's the ticking clock above our heads. And the question we have to ask is terrifying. What happens to humanity when the sun resets civilization itself? Look up at the sky on a clear morning and you will see the same warm light that has touched this planet for billions of years, the sun. It feels eternal, steady, life-giving. We time our days by its rise and fall, our seasons by its tilt, our years by its endless return. Crops unfurl their leaves toward it, oceans dance with its tides, and even our moods shift when its rays linger or fade. For most of us, the sun is background, reliable, taken for granted. It is there when we wake, it is there when we sleep, always burning, always shining. But the truth is that the sun is not gentle. It is not still. Beneath that golden light lies a roaring engine of unimaginable violence, a cauldron of nuclear fire where every second more energy is released than all of humanity could ever produce in the entire history of civilization. The calm disk we see is only an illusion, a bright mask hiding eruptions vast enough to swallow planets whole. Every so often the sun lashes out, gigantic flares, sudden bursts of radiation, arcs of plasma twisting through space like cosmic serpents. They leap from the solar surface with energies equal to billions of nuclear bombs, hurling charged particles across the void at unimaginable speed. Most of the time, Earth is shielded. Our planet has a magnetic field, a protective cocoon that deflects much of this invisible fury. But sometimes, not often, yet often enough, the sun breaks through. And when it does, the Earth feels it. Scientists call them solar flares and coronal mass ejections. To astronomers, they are natural. To satellites, they are deadly. To us, though we may not realize it, they are an existential threat. Imagine, one moment, a peaceful morning commute, emails and phone calls, lights humming in skyscrapers. The next, silence, no signal, no electricity, screens blank, engines stilled, entire cities suddenly blind and mute. All because of a ripple of invisible fire that left the sun days earlier. It sounds like science fiction, but it is not. It has happened before. It will happen again, and the only question is, when? To understand why this matters, let us pause and consider how we live. In 2025, every breath of modern life flows through hidden wires and circuits. Electricity powers hospitals, refrigerators, airplanes, trains. Satellites in orbit time our financial trades, guide our navigation, relay our voices. We carry in our pockets computers more powerful than the machines that once sent astronauts to the moon, yet we forget how fragile it all is. Behind every click, every swipe, every simple convenience lies a chain of infrastructure so delicate that a single cosmic spark could snap it apart. Our ancestors once feared eclipses. A sudden shadow over the sun was enough to send whole civilizations into panic, sacrifices offered, prayers whispered, wars postponed. Today, we laugh at those fears. We know the mechanics of orbits and shadows. But what if the true danger was not in the sun disappearing, but in it burning too fiercely, not in losing its light, but in receiving too much of it all at once? Imagine standing on a beach at dawn. The horizon glows pink, the ocean reflects soft fire, gulls cry above you. Nothing seems amiss. Yet at that very moment, millions of kilometers away, a storm erupts on the sun. A magnetic knot twists, snaps, and releases an arc of plasma. It travels across space at millions of kilometers per hour. In 2 days' time, it will reach Earth. And when it does, the magnetic field will shimmer. Auroras will blaze across skies no matter where you stand. And in the humming heart of our technology, chaos will bloom. Transformers overload, satellites fry, GPS vanishes, networks collapse. It is hard to imagine something so beautiful. Green curtains of aurora dancing across New York, London, Tokyo, bringing with it so much destruction. Yet beauty and terror often share the same light. This is why the story of solar flares is not just science. It is a warning about fragility. Civilization, as grand as it seems, rests on invisible currents of electricity. Like a spiderweb stretched across the earth, strong in design, but tear it in just the right place, and the whole web unravels. So tonight, as you drift in thought, consider this. The same sun that warms your skin can, in an instant, reset the world. History shows us resets before. Floods, fires, ice ages, comets. The sun too may hold its own reset in reserve. Silent above, steady above, but never entirely safe. And so we begin our journey into the invisible storms of the sun, into the fragile lattice of our modern lives, into the haunting possibility that one day soon a solar flare could plunge us into a new dark age. History has a way of whispering warnings before it shouts. In the autumn of 1859, one such whisper became a thunderclap. It began, as many cosmic tales do, with a man and a telescope. Richard Carrington, an English astronomer, had risen early on September 1st to sketch the shifting patterns of sunspots. These dark blemishes, cooler regions on the solar surface, were curiosities of their time, observed but not feared. As he traced the clusters on paper, Carrington witnessed something no human eye had ever seen in such detail: an intense flash of light erupting from the surface of the sun. It was sudden, almost like a heartbeat of the star itself. Within moments the flare faded. Carrington hardly knew it then, but he had just observed the largest solar storm in recorded history. What followed was something the world was unprepared for. In the nights after the flare, skies erupted with auroras so bright they rivaled the moon. Curtains of green, red, and violet shimmered across the heavens, not just in the polar regions, but as far south as the Caribbean. In Havana, people gazed upward at crimson waves rippling through the night. In Rome, the skies glowed emerald. In the American plains, farmers rose before dawn, convinced it was already morning, because the auroras lit their fields so brightly they could see to harvest. Newspapers wrote of the wonder. Many wrote of fear. Some saw it as divine anger, others as omens of war. But the beauty was only half the story. On the other side of the world's fascination lay chaos. The telegraph system, the nervous system of the 19th century, began to fail. Operators in Boston and New York reported sparks leaping from their machines. Telegraph paper caught fire. Shocks leapt into the hands of workers. In some cases, even when disconnected from power supplies, the wires carried so much induced current from the geomagnetic storm that messages could still be sent, powered only by the storm itself. Imagine the bewilderment. Wires alive with energy from the sky, as if some ghost had taken hold of the network. It was both miracle and menace. The Carrington Event, as it would later be called, was a reminder. The sun does not always whisper. Sometimes it roars. Now pause a moment and imagine if the same storm struck today. In 1859, the world was still local, still slow. There were no satellites to blind, no airplanes to ground, no hospitals filled with life support machines tethered to grids, no trillions of digital dollars floating through invisible channels of data. A telegraph could burn, and the world would continue. Messages could be delayed, and commerce would recover. But now, our civilization's pulse beats entirely through circuits, codes, and currents. Every heartbeat of the digital world depends on electricity flowing without interruption. And a Carrington-class storm would not just interrupt, it would shatter. Satellites would fail first, their delicate electronics overwhelmed. GPS signals gone, communication satellites fried, weather tracking blind. Within hours, planes would lose navigation, ships would drift, financial markets would freeze. The grid itself, vast and interconnected, would falter next. Transformers, the heavy, expensive machines at the heart of power networks, would overload and burn. In some regions, grids might shut down as a precaution. In others, cascading failures would plunge entire nations into darkness. And the thing about transformers is that they cannot be easily replaced. Building one takes months, even years. In a global disaster, with supply chains broken, how do you replace thousands at once? The answer is simple: you don't. Consider your own life for a moment. Without power, your phone becomes nothing more than a slab of glass. Without satellites, maps are paper, if you can find them. Without refrigeration, food spoils within days. Without pumps, water stops flowing to cities. Hospitals run on generators, but for how long? A week? 2? Then silence. The Carrington Event of 1859 did not destroy civilization because civilization was not yet electrified. But today, the same storm could erase the scaffolding of our modern world in a single strike. Not because humanity is weak, but because humanity is more connected, more dependent, more fragile in its reliance on invisible networks than ever before. And here lies the unsettling irony. Scientists know this. Space weather agencies monitor the sun daily. Satellites like SOHO and Stereo track solar flares and coronal ejections. We can predict when storms might strike with some hours of warning. But knowing is not the same as preventing. Imagine being told a tsunami is coming, but you cannot move the city. Imagine being told lightning will strike, but there is nowhere to hide. That is where we stand with solar storms. Awareness without immunity. Some dismiss these fears as exaggeration. They say, "It hasn't happened in my lifetime, why should it?" But the record of the Earth disagrees. Ice cores drilled from Greenland and Antarctica reveal traces of ancient solar storms, signatures of cosmic radiation embedded in layers of frozen time. They tell us that Carrington was not unique. Even stronger storms have swept across this planet before. Civilization then may not have noticed. Civilization now would not survive so quietly. So when we speak of solar flares, we are not speaking of myth nor speculation. We are speaking of inevitability. Like earthquakes along fault lines, like eruptions along volcanic arcs, the question is not if, but when. A Carrington event today would be more than a storm. It would be a reset button, pressed not by hands but by the sun itself. As you picture that, let your imagination drift. Streets gone silent, cities lit only by starlight and fire, the hum of modernity replaced by the rustle of wind through powerless towers. The same auroras that dazzled farmers in 1859 blazing once more, only this time not as a wonder, but as a funeral for an age of electricity. The sun's beauty, unasked, would become the spark of our undoing. And perhaps in that silence we might remember Carrington, sketching sunspots in his small observatory, watching as a sudden flash rewrote history. His warning was recorded, but did we listen? Close your eyes for a moment and think about how many invisible connections surround you right now. The phone in your pocket is not just a phone, It is a doorway. Through it you reach friends, banks, libraries, entire worlds. The light overhead, steady and taken for granted, is part of a chain that stretches from a power plant miles away through transformers, wires and switches, all working in silent synchrony. The voice you hear in your headphones, the words on your screen, the heartbeat of modern life. All of it travels through a web of glass fibers, wireless signals and humming currents. It is easy to believe this web is unbreakable. After all, it covers the globe, connecting continents, crossing oceans. But like a spider's thread, strong only as long as its pattern remains intact, it is fragile. Pull too hard and it tears. Expose it to the sun's fury and it may vanish altogether. Our entire civilization now runs on code and current. Consider a single moment in your day. When you wake, your alarm has been set by your phone's clock, synchronized by signals from satellites in orbit. You check your messages, flowing through cell towers, data centers, undersea cables. Coffee? The beans arrived by container ships tracked by GPS. Milk? Refrigerated trucks, powered warehouses, supply chains all tuned to the rhythm of electricity. Even the cashless tap at the counter draws its life from banks whose numbers exist not on paper, but in digital ledgers humming on servers. Now imagine this entire orchestra silenced in an instant. Without power, the internet dies. Without the internet, communication collapses. Without communication, commerce freezes. Factories halt. Supply chains disintegrate. Within days, grocery shelves thin. Within weeks, medicines run short. The miracle of modern medicine, organ transplants, refrigerated vaccines, delicate surgeries guided by machines, all depend on the same fragile grid. Remove it and the miracles become memories. And yet, we rarely think about this fragility. Like fish in water, we swim in electricity without noticing it. We marvel at skyscrapers, airplanes, global trade, forgetting they float not on concrete or steel, but on invisible energy. Energy that flows constantly, second by second, without pause. Interrupt it, and the illusion of permanence falls away. The glass threads of our web are especially vulnerable. Thousands of kilometers of undersea cables carry our voices and money across oceans. They lie silent on the seabed, transmitting pulses of light, each one a fragment of thought or wealth. Yet they are defenseless against geomagnetic storms. Imagine billions of signals, emails, calls, stock trades, all lost in static. The cables themselves may survive, but the repeaters, the electronics, could fry in an instant. Then there are the satellites, more than 8,000 orbiting Earth, mapping our roads, predicting our weather, guiding our planes, monitoring our crops. They are the eyes and ears of civilization, and yet they float exposed in the vacuum with no shield but thin metal. A solar storm strong enough would blind them all. The sky would go silent. Think of airplanes in flight, tens of thousands each day, pilots suddenly stripped of navigation. Think of shipping lanes, trucks, emergency responders, all dependent on GPS. Without satellites, our world shrinks back to local horizons. Landmarks replace coordinates. Word of mouth replaces maps. And consider finance. In a single day, trillions of dollars pulse through digital veins. Algorithms trade faster than human eyes can blink. Remove electricity, and those numbers evaporate. Wealth, once solid in appearance, is revealed as nothing but fragile digits. Banks without records, accounts erased, contracts dissolved. Civilization itself begins to unravel not with fire, not with war, but with silence in the wires. This is the paradox. The more advanced we become, the more delicate we are. Stone tools could not fail. Fire could not crash. But silicon chips and satellites? They are miracles balanced on the edge of catastrophe. And this is what a solar flare threatens to expose. Our age believes itself strong because it is fast, connected, global. But in truth, its strength is only as lasting as the currents beneath it. Without those currents, the towers of glass are only empty shells. The servers, dead metal. The cities, dark husks. Now imagine the moment after. You walk down a city street at night. No hum of traffic lights, no glow of neon, no vibration of trains beneath the ground. Windows are black. The silence is thick, heavier than darkness itself. Somewhere a siren wails, then cuts off. The stars overhead seem impossibly bright, untouched by the calamity below. For the first time in generations, the city is blind, and you can feel how much of your life has rested on light that was never guaranteed. This is the fragile web. Glass, code, current. It has given us wonders. It has bound the planet into one. But it is not eternal. It is not unbreakable. It only takes one solar storm, one cosmic breath from the sun, to remind us how temporary our age might truly be. It begins quietly. No sirens, no explosions, no warning, just a silence too deep to notice at first. Somewhere in the upper atmosphere, a wave of charged particles has just collided with the Earth's magnetic field. The shield wavers, shudders, bends under the invisible impact. Currents surge through wires, transformers groan, and then, one by one, the lights blink out. In a single moment, the modern world goes dark. Imagine yourself at home. Perhaps you're making breakfast, scrolling through messages, the kettle humming on its base. Suddenly the screen freezes. The lights flicker. A sharp pop sounds from somewhere unseen, then nothing. The room is filled with a silence you did not know existed, because the quiet whir of machines has always been there. You reach for your phone, but the signal bars vanish. You restart it, but the network is gone. Now multiply this small silence by billions. Across the planet, elevators stall between floors. Trains halt mid-track. Traffic lights die, leaving intersections filled with confused drivers. In airports, control towers stare at blank radar screens. In hospitals, machines beep once, then fall silent, forcing doctors to scramble for hand-powered equipment. In stock exchanges, screens filled with numbers dissolve into static, wiping away billions in a blink. And then, as night falls, the full weight of the blackout becomes visible. Cities that once glowed like constellations on satellite images are now islands of shadow. New York, London, Tokyo, all dark. Only the stars, brighter than most people have ever seen in their lifetimes, shimmer above. At first, many assume it is temporary, a grid failure, a storm. Power will return in minutes, perhaps an hour. Neighbours step onto balconies, waiting. Radios crackle with fragments before falling silent. In living rooms, families light candles, expecting news that never comes. But the minutes stretch into hours. Phones cannot charge. Gas pumps do not work. Supermarket doors, reliant on electricity, refuse to open. Subways remain stalled underground. In some places, generators hum to life, offering islands of light in seas of darkness. But even these lifelines are fragile, dependent on fuel supplies that will not last. By morning, confusion has become unease. Without television, without internet, without phones, rumours spread faster than truth. Some whisper of war, others of terrorism. Some cling to the idea of a massive cyber attack. Few understand the truth. It was the sun, not men, that struck. Panic begins small. In cities, bottled water vanishes first, then canned food. Long lines form at gas stations, but pumps no longer work. Hospitals ration their dwindling supplies of fuel for generators. Parents clutch children, unsure how to explain the silence of a world that has always buzzed. And everywhere, the auroras blaze. Curtains of green, violet, and red ripple across the sky, painting the blackout in colours more vivid than any festival. People stare upward in awe and fear. The beauty feels wrong, like music at a funeral. By the end of day one, the realization sinks in. This is not a glitch. This is not temporary. The silence has depth. The blackout has permanence. And for the first time in centuries, humanity feels the weight of night as our ancestors once did. Unbroken, unlit, unending. But beneath the surface, the deeper consequences are already unfolding. Power stations have fried beyond repair. Satellites, blinded, tumble uselessly in orbit. The grid is not just off, it is broken. Think of what that means. Banks cannot access accounts. Medicines requiring refrigeration begin to spoil. Planes grounded on tarmacs stay grounded. Food supply chains stall. Farms dependent on electric irrigation pumps fall silent. Day one is not about chaos, not yet. Day one is about confusion. People wait for something to turn back on, for authorities to reassure them, for the familiar hum of electricity to return. They wait, and nothing comes. In that waiting, you feel it. How much of your life has been built on the assumption of continuity? Lights will turn on, trains will run, phones will connect, the internet will answer. But now, the assumption is gone. And with it, the quiet knowledge begins to grow. Everything has changed. When you step outside that first night, the stars stretch endlessly above. They look older, sharper, more real than ever before. For a moment you feel the wonder your ancestors must have felt when they looked skyward. Awe, fear, and the deep, unsettling question: how small are we really, beneath this endless fire above us? Day one is only the beginning. The real test will come with day 2 and day 7 and all the days after, when silence hardens into scarcity and scarcity becomes struggle. Day 1 was disbelief. Day 2 was unease. By the end of the first week, disbelief hardens into something heavier: fear. The silence of powerless cities no longer feels temporary. Streetlights stay dark, screens remain dead, and the hum of machines does not return. People stop asking when the power will come back and begin asking if it ever will. At first, the rhythms of daily life limp along. Offices open by candlelight. Teachers gather children in classrooms, improvising lessons without screens. Shopkeepers take cash, scrawling receipts on paper. But very quickly the flaws show. Banks cannot verify balances. Credit cards are useless. Most people carry little cash. Within days, commerce collapses into barter. Food for medicine, fuel for water, trust for survival. Without refrigeration, groceries spoil. Milk sours, meat rots. Farmers' markets swell with the last wave of perishables, then fall silent. Bottled water, hoarded by those quick to act, becomes treasure. Queues stretch around blocks for supplies that never arrive. Hospitals ration their generators, turning away patients not deemed critical. Surgeries are cancelled. Vaccines warm and expire. Machines once routine for keeping premature babies alive fall silent. The miracle of modern medicine vanishes in a matter of days. Food shortages bite slowly, but water vanishes fast. Cities depend on pumps, and pumps depend on electricity. Without them, taps cough once, then run dry. By the second week, people carry buckets to rivers, lakes, or fountains. Some boil water over open fires. Others drink it raw, sickness spreading in the shadows. Dysentery returns, a ghost from the past. In rural areas, wells provide relief, but only for those with hand pumps. Those with electric systems stare helplessly at dry faucets. For millions, the struggle is not hunger, but thirst. Where people gather in desperation, panic follows. A rumour sparks in the dark. A shipment of food is coming. Crowds surge, fight, then scatter in disappointment. Small stores are looted, their shelves emptied in hours. Pharmacies vanish first. Antibiotics, painkillers, even bandages swept away. Police try to hold order, but radios fail, and without fuel their patrols dwindle. In some neighborhoods, citizens form their own watches. In others, gangs seize the moment. Curfews are whispered, not enforced. Trust thins. Fear grows. Airports are ghost towns. Planes sit lifeless on runways, waiting for fuel that never comes, guidance systems that no longer exist. Ships idle at ports, unable to coordinate with silent harbours. Global trade halts. Here and there, sparks of survival remain. A hospital with a private fuel reserve. A town with a functioning water wheel or a solar array. A farm that never abandoned manual tools. These become havens, islands of relative safety in oceans of uncertainty. But word spreads quickly. Refugees flow toward these bright spots, overwhelming them. Soon, even havens struggle under the weight of too many hungry mouths. The greatest collapse in these weeks is not infrastructure, but certainty. People realize no one is coming to fix this. Governments send out messages where they can, but with no mass communication, only fragments spread. Trust in authority erodes. Some cling to leaders, hoping for calm. Others blame them, whispering of lies, conspiracies, betrayal. And over all of it, the auroras still blaze. For nights on end, the skies ripple in colours no city has ever seen, like a cruel reminder of what caused it all. Green rivers of light flow above starving neighbourhoods. Crimson sheets burn over silent highways. People look upward with awe, but also dread. Beauty has become omen. By the third week, survival skills once forgotten become vital again. People learn to dig for water, to cook over wood fires, to trade with neighbours for essentials. Urban parks become gardens. Balconies sprout vegetables in desperate soil. Communities either pull together or fall apart. Some rediscover resilience. Families share food. Strangers guard one another. Humanity remembers cooperation. Others turn to violence. Knives and guns replace contracts and currency. The line between civilization and collapse becomes thin, blurred, uncertain. Nights stretch long. With no artificial light, darkness dominates. People sleep earlier, rise with the dawn. Conversations replace screens. Stories return to firelight. Silence reigns where once traffic roared. The first weeks reveal a truth few want to face. Our world was not built to survive without electricity. Every layer of comfort, every system of security was tied to that invisible current. With it gone, society bends, and in many places it begins to break. The blackout is no longer an inconvenience, it is reality. And as the first month closes, humanity stands at a threshold. Adapt or perish. In the first weeks, the crisis is hunger and thirst. But soon, another absence begins to weigh even heavier: knowledge itself. For centuries, humanity has stored its memory in fragile vessels. At first it was stone, carved with symbols that weathered millennia, then papyrus, parchment, paper. But in the last half-century, we placed almost everything into machines of glass and silicon. Our libraries became databases. Our letters became emails. Our maps became apps. Our memories, digitized and uploaded, no longer lived in books on shelves, but in servers humming quietly in anonymous rooms. And when the power died, so too did those memories. At first, people do not notice. Their first concern is food, water, warmth. But slowly, realization dawns. Medical records are gone. Bank accounts cannot be verified. The sum of a lifetime savings, nothing more than digits, dissolves into blank screens. University libraries, once vast in scope, are locked behind firewalls that no longer exist. Online archives vanish in silence. A child asks a parent for help with homework, and the parent reflexively reaches for a phone that no longer answers. A doctor recalls a rare treatment but has no database to consult, no way to double-check dosages. Farmers want to know how to treat soil, but the guides they trusted online have vanished. The abyss grows deeper each day. Suddenly, paper returns to power. Old textbooks, long ignored, become precious. Encyclopedias, dusty in second-hand shops, are rescued like sacred relics. Handwritten recipes are shared as heirlooms. Farmers rediscover manuals printed decades ago. Even road atlases, yellowed and cracked, are treasures in glove compartments. But there are not enough. For every book preserved, 1,000 gigabytes of knowledge vanish. An entire generation raised on screens realizes they no longer know where to turn. The internet, once taken for granted as an eternal oracle, was never eternal at all. It was fragile. And now it is gone. Think of what this means. An engineer trained to design but reliant on software cannot recalculate by hand. A navigator who has never read the stars cannot guide a ship. A student who has never used a card catalogue cannot find knowledge outside of search engines. Skills once common have become rare, and the few who hold them suddenly wield great power. This is the abyss, not merely the loss of electricity, but the loss of memory. Civilization without memory is like a person with amnesia. We may walk, speak, even dream, but we do not know where we came from, and so we cannot know where we are going. Into the void, voices rise. Elders become libraries. Storytellers become archives. Around fires and candles, people share what they know. Herbs that heal, methods of preserving food, skills of mending clothes, ways to read weather from the sky. Knowledge shrinks from infinite digital horizons to the small circle of what a human mind can remember. It feels both fragile and sacred. A grandmother teaching her grandchild how to sew. A farmer showing neighbours how to tell soil health by smell. A sailor pointing out constellations to guide by night. What once seemed quaint becomes survival. Without records, trust dissolves. Who owns land if no registry exists? Who holds wealth if no bank can prove it? Contracts become meaningless. Only the word and reputation of a person remain, fragile currency in uncertain times. Disputes rise, and without documents, justice becomes the memory of witnesses. Subjective, shifting, corruptible. Perhaps the most haunting is the silence of culture. Music stored on streaming services is gone. Films, television, books stored digitally, gone. Families remember fragments of songs, half-forgotten lyrics sung softly by firelight. Children raised on cartoons see only blank screens. The shared cultural memory of billions vanishes in an instant, replaced by stories retold from fading human voices. In this silence, the night grows heavier. Civilization feels smaller. The future feels uncertain. For what is a civilization, if not its memory? Here and there, sparks survive. Printed books hoarded in libraries. Handwritten journals. Communities that value oral tradition. And in rare places, small solar-powered servers, preppers' archives, or government vaults built to withstand catastrophe. These fragments are lifeboats on a vast ocean of forgetting, but most of humanity drifts into the abyss, cut loose from the knowledge it once assumed would always be there. And so the realization comes: we have lived as though knowledge was infinite, but we never made it indestructible. Our ancestors carved stories into stone, and those stories survived thousands of years. We carved ours into silicon, and they lasted a single power outage. The abyss is not only the blackout of light, it is the blackout of memory. And as the weeks stretch into months, humanity stands at a dangerous edge. Without memory, the past slips away, and without the past, the future cannot be built. As the weeks lengthen into months, the blackout begins to carve new shapes into daily life. What started as improvisation Scavenging canned food, lighting candles, boiling water, slowly turns into something else. The question is no longer, how do we endure tonight? It becomes, how do we live tomorrow? And with that shift, humanity begins to rediscover itself in ways both humbling and profound. In the cities, small patches of green, once ornamental, are suddenly transformed. Lawns become gardens, rooftops sprout vegetables, and flower beds are turned over with trembling hands eager for seed. The first harvests are clumsy. Plants wither, soil is too thin, water too scarce. Yet persistence takes root. Children who once swiped glowing screens now dig with their fingers into the dirt, their laughter mixed with the hope that something edible might rise from the soil. In the countryside, old farms awaken with new reverence. The man who still knows how to sharpen a plough, the woman who remembers how to save seed. These people, once considered relics of another age, become guides, leaders, even lifelines. The same is true of craft. Objects we once tossed aside are now mended with care. Shoes are stitched, not replaced. Coats are patched, not discarded. Workshops flicker with firelight as hands relearn how to shape wood and metal without power tools. The blacksmith's hammer rings again, echoing as though time has folded backward. A sewing needle is suddenly as valuable as gold. Skills that slept in forgotten corners reawaken, and with them the pride of making something with one's own hands. In medicine, the absence of machines forces a return to simplicity. The sterile hum of hospitals has faded, leaving silence broken only by the shuffle of feet and the rustle of pages in old books. Herbs and roots, once dismissed as folklore, now become medicine again. Willow bark for pain, mint for digestion, garlic for infection. Gardens of healing grow beside gardens of food. Many lives are still lost, but those who survive begin to see the world differently, not only as a place of scarcity, but as a place still filled with remedies if one knows where to look. Navigation, too, returns to older ways. Without satellites, the stars once more become maps. Farmers read the weather by the scent of the air, by the way clouds form on the horizon, by the songs of birds that sense storms long before humans do. Sailors trust the pull of tides, the shift of currents, the memory of their elders. The world itself, once ignored, becomes a living text. Slowly, humanity learns to read it again. In all of this, age takes on a new weight. Elders who remember a time before constant screens find their voices sought after. Their memories of how to preserve food, mend clothes, or work without machines become teachings for the young. Around fires, grandparents tell not only stories, but instructions. How to knit, how to cook without ovens, how to measure time without clocks. Age, once sidelined in a world that worshipped speed, becomes anchor and library. Communities, too, begin to reform around these rediscoveries. Neighbours who barely spoke now share tools, trade seeds, guard each other at night. One family grows beans, another raises chickens, another knows how to mend metal. Alone, each would falter. Together they survive. Not all places find this balance. Some fracture under distrust and hoarding. Violence simmers where fear outweighs cooperation. But many others endure because of one simple truth that reasserts itself. Survival is collective. Life itself settles into a different rhythm. With no glowing screens, no engines humming through the night, darkness regains its dominion. People rise with dawn, sleep soon after dusk. Days are long and physical, nights are long and filled with talk, with silence, with stars. There is hardship, yes, but also a strange intimacy, with nature, with neighbours, even with oneself. The tempo of the earth, once drowned out by neon and noise, returns, steady and ancient. And yet, even here, in collapse, the spark of innovation flickers. Children invent toys from scraps of wood and cloth. Adults fashion stoves from metal barrels, radios from salvaged parts, water wheels from broken machines. Ingenuity does not die. It bends, reshapes itself, finding ways to light a candle in the dark. Each small creation is fragile, but also a reminder that even in ruin, the human mind refuses to stand still. So the weeks become months, and the months begin to whisper of years. Humanity, stripped of its illusions, finds itself not erased, but reborn into something older, slower, perhaps harsher, yet also strangely resilient. Civilization is no longer the glow of circuits and screens. It is in hands that build, in minds that remember, in neighbours who share, in the soil beneath our feet. The blackout may have taken our machines, but it has not taken our will. When months pass and the blackout shows no sign of lifting, the fragile threads of society begin to fray. What once bound the world together, governments, economies, systems of law, was already weakened by the silence of technology. Without electricity, without communication, without the constant hum of coordination, authority begins to crumble. And in its place, new powers emerge. At first, people wait for order to return. They gather at city halls, listening for announcements, searching for officials who can promise repair. But as days bleed into weeks and weeks into months, those promises falter. Governments still exist in name, but without the ability to project power across dead networks, they feel distant, even ghostly. Orders may still be written on paper, but few are able to carry them beyond the local town or village. The state, once vast, shrinks into something thin and fragile, a shadow of its former self. Into this vacuum, communities begin to take on their own shapes. In some places, neighbourhoods organise themselves, pooling food, guarding streets, electing leaders to keep the peace. These communities feel small, intimate, fragile, but real. Trust grows slowly, but it grows. In other places, the opposite happens. Fear breeds hoarding, and the strongest take control by force. Groups armed with weapons seize warehouses, ration food according to loyalty, and declare themselves rulers. The blackout has levelled the world, but the hunger for power remains. Soon, a new geography of influence emerges. Cities, once towering centres of authority, often fare the worst. Their sheer size becomes their downfall. Too many mouths to feed, too few resources, too little cooperation. In the chaos, gangs rise, carving territories street by street. A single building becomes a fortress. A block becomes a kingdom. The skyline still glitters with glass, but the towers are empty shells, and the real power lies in who controls the nearest well, or the last working generator, or the road leading out. The countryside tells a different story. There, smaller communities, rooted in land, endure with greater ease. Farms feed villages, and villages protect farms. Local leaders, a farmer with land, a healer with knowledge, a carpenter with tools, become figures of influence. They are not kings in the old sense, but their voices carry weight. Authority grows not from law, but from necessity. Who can provide food? Who can defend against raiders? Who can trade with neighbours? These questions shape power more than any title once printed on paper. As months turn into a year, the lines of this new world harden. Tribes form, though not always in the old sense of blood and ancestry. Instead, they form from proximity and need. Families bind together, then join with neighbours, then with nearby villages. Shared survival becomes shared identity. Over time, rituals grow, a weekly gathering, a seasonal feast, a story told to children by firelight. Culture begins to reweave itself, simple and local, yet binding. But where there are tribes, there are lords. In regions where cooperation thrives, leadership emerges gently. Chosen elders, respected healers, skilled farmers. In others, power is taken with violence. Armed groups become war bands. Leaders crown themselves with titles borrowed from history: captain, general, protector. They hoard resources, demand loyalty, enforce order with fear. Some even dream of kingdoms rising again, banners flying over ruins, empires carved from collapse. Travel between places grows dangerous. Roads, once safe and patrolled, now cut through uncertain territory. A journey of a few miles requires negotiation, tribute, or the risk of ambush. Traders emerge, brave souls carrying grain, salt, cloth between settlements. But they are never safe. The map of the world shrinks, not by oceans or mountains, but by the invisible borders of fear. And yet, within this fragmentation, life continues. Children are born, and their first words are spoken not in the language of nations, but of villages. Festivals, though smaller, still light the dark. Songs rise in the night, sung by voices that refuse to surrender. In some places, community grows stronger than it was before, for necessity teaches people to rely on one another. In others, cruelty rules, and the weak are crushed beneath the ambitions of the strong. What is striking is how quickly the old world fades. Within a year, the habits of electricity, the glowing screens, the endless communication feel like dreams. The young grow up never having known them, their games played with sticks and stones, their stories told by elders, not by streams. Civilization, vast and global, has collapsed into pockets. Tribes of a few hundred, lords ruling over valleys, isolated islands of survival across a silent earth. The blackout did not only reset technology, it reset power. Nations shrank into fragments, cities dissolved into tribes, and in their place, new lords rose carrying the same ambitions that have always lived in human hearts: to lead, to rule, to hold dominion. It is in this fractured landscape that the long road of rebuilding will begin. But whether that road leads to cooperation or to endless war remains uncertain. The age of nations has ended. The age of tribes and lords has begun. Even in the shadow of collapse, the human spirit resists silence. Destruction may have stripped away the scaffolding of modern life, but within the ruins, small sparks of renewal begin to flicker. They are fragile at first, uncertain, like seedlings pushing through broken concrete. Yet they speak to something unyielding in us. The instinct to rebuild, to adapt, to create even when all seems lost. In the aftermath of the blackout, most communities cling to the basics: food, water, warmth, safety. But as days and months pass, some begin to look beyond survival. Curiosity returns. Ingenuity stirs. People turn their eyes to the wreckage of the old world and ask, what can still be used? What can still be made? Wrecked machines, once useless, become treasure troves of parts. An abandoned car is not a car anymore. It is steel to be hammered into tools, glass to be repurposed, wires to be stripped and woven into new inventions. Burned-out transformers are pried open, their copper coils reborn as makeshift stoves or coils for hand-built radios. Even the skeletons of skyscrapers, silent and hollow, provide beams and stone to rebuild homes. From the debris of one civilization, the foundations of another begin to rise. Energy, too, is not forgotten. Humanity has always been restless with fire, always searching for ways to capture light and motion. With fossil fuels scarce, eyes turn to the elements themselves. Rivers are coaxed into turning water wheels. Wind pushes against blades carved from wood and scavenged metal. Solar panels, pulled from rooftops or fields, are carried to new homes where they can power a single bulb, a radio, a lifeline of light in the dark. In some places, entire villages gather around a working windmill or a micro-hydroelectric wheel, as though it were a new kind of temple, glowing with the sacred promise of power. At night, when the stars return in numbers unseen for generations, the sight of even a single lamp glowing from a solar battery feels like a miracle. Children gather around it in awe, staring as if the small flame of electricity were a piece of the old world resurrected. And in their wonder, hope flickers. Yet these sparks of renewal are not evenly spread. Some communities succeed in harnessing remnants of energy, while others languish in darkness. The gap between those who can coax power back and those who cannot becomes a new kind of divide, not of wealth, but of innovation. A village with a working mill, a functioning radio, or a preserved archive suddenly finds itself stronger than its neighbours, able to communicate, to trade, to defend. Knowledge itself becomes currency, and those who can teach others how to build, to wire, to preserve, are treated like treasure. It is not only machines that return, ideas bloom as well. People experiment with clay ovens, with fermentation, with weaving and tanning and smithing. Forgotten crafts are reinvented through trial and error. The very absence of convenience becomes a teacher, forcing invention where once there was only consumption. The old phrase, necessity is the mother of invention, becomes not a proverb but a daily reality. Of course, these attempts are not without struggle. Many contraptions fail, water wheels crack, windmill blades snap, batteries corrode, radios sputter with nothing but static. Yet even in failure, lessons are learned. Each misstep is a rung on the ladder upward. And when something does succeed, when a hand-built mill turns, when a bulb glows, when a voice crackles faintly across a homemade radio, entire communities rejoice as though the future itself had briefly returned. Among the most striking changes is how innovation shifts from individual pursuit to collective endeavour. No longer the domain of corporations or research labs, discovery now happens in barns, in ruins, in fields. Villagers gather around a tinkerer's bench, watching wires twist, offering advice, lending hands. Children watch with wide eyes, not only learning but inheriting. In this way, knowledge spreads faster than in the old world, not through screens, but through presence, through stories, through demonstration. And there is something humbling in this return. The world is no longer powered by vast grids hidden from sight, but by small, visible acts of ingenuity. A light that shines does so because someone in the village wired it. A wheel turns because neighbours cut, shaped and placed it. The connection between effort and result is immediate, tangible. Technology no longer feels distant or mysterious. It feels human again. These sparks of renewal do not erase the hardships. Hunger still gnaws, sickness still claims lives, violence still lurks at the edges. But within the darkness, they offer something precious. The reminder that collapse is not the end, only a turning. Civilization has fallen before, and each time from ashes and ruins, people have found ways to rise again. Now, in this new age lit by candles and flickering lamps, humanity begins that climb once more. Step by step, wheel by wheel, fire by fire, the long road of renewal stretches ahead. It is uncertain, fragile, easily broken, but it is there. And as long as sparks of ingenuity burn in the human mind, the darkness can never be absolute. When the machines fall silent and the grids lie broken, the earth itself begins to breathe differently. At first, the change is almost invisible. Cities remain filled with smoke from fires, streets crowded with those searching for food, skies glowing unnaturally with auroras. But as weeks pass into months, something stirs beneath the silence. A shift not in humanity, but in the world that cradles it. Without the constant hum of engines, the air slowly clears. Skies once hazed by exhaust and industry grow sharper, colours deepening into a blue many had never seen. At night the stars blaze in impossible numbers, entire constellations, long buried in the glow of neon, return in clarity so fierce it feels like revelation. For the first time in centuries, the heavens are once again a wilderness of light, stretching endlessly over a darkened earth. In abandoned streets, plants creep through cracks in the pavement. Grasses sprout in places once scoured clean by traffic. Vines curl up lampposts and balconies. Birds return to rooftops. Squirrels, foxes and deer venture deeper into silent neighbourhoods. Rivers, no longer polluted by factories that ceased overnight, run clearer, fish returning to waters once thought poisoned. Along coasts with shipping stalled and oil spills absent, marine life stirs in numbers unseen in generations. It is not all gentle. With humanity's grip loosened, wilderness also grows bolder, harsher. Wolves emerge from forests, reclaiming hillsides. Bears wander through ruined suburbs. Insects spread unchecked, their buzzing louder without the drone of traffic. Where garbage piles up, rats multiply, their numbers swelling in places once kept in balance by constant human order. The natural world does not mourn our silence, it fills it. For people living in this new balance, the return of nature is both blessing and threat. Fields left untended by vanished machines grow wild, but they also become fertile again. Crops planted by hand benefit from cleaner rains, but they must now compete with weeds and wildlife. Hunters discover that deer herds grow larger, easier to track, but predators too are hungrier, braver. A walk into the forest becomes not just a gathering of wood, but a negotiation with a wilderness less afraid of humans than it has been in centuries. Disease too reclaims space. With sanitation faltering and medicine scarce, microbes that once seemed distant become immediate again. Streams carry bacteria, mosquitoes thrive in stagnant waters, and illnesses long considered minor flare into killers. Nature heals in some places, but it also reminds humanity that it was never tame, only held in uneasy balance. Yet there is beauty. Imagine standing at the edge of a city, its towers dark and hollow. Around you, silence reigns. And then from between concrete and steel, trees rise, leaves shimmering in sunlight that once reflected only on glass. Birds nest in the eaves of office buildings. Flowers push through sidewalks. It is as though the earth, patient and watchful, has been waiting for this moment, waiting for the machinery to falter so it might paint again on its own canvas. For some, this resurgence brings despair. The sight of wilderness reclaiming human triumph feels like loss, as though the earth itself has declared humanity temporary. But for others, it brings awe. They see not only endings, but beginnings, a reminder that the world is resilient, that life adapts, that even in collapse, beauty persists. In this way, nature becomes not just background but teacher, showing that renewal is possible even after devastation. Communities begin to adapt to this shifting balance. Farmers learn to build stronger fences, hunters to move in groups, healers to look again at forests as pharmacies filled with medicine. Children grow up not with screens, but with streams and stones, learning by touch, by smell, by the rhythm of seasons. Civilization shrinks, but life itself expands, filling every gap left behind. And always, in the silence of night, the stars remain, reminders of both fragility and wonder. For centuries, humanity built towers to outshine them. Now, without electricity, they shine unchallenged, ancient witnesses to every rise and fall. This, then, is nature's turn, not revenge, not punishment, but reclamation. When the wires fall silent, the earth does not weep. It grows, it returns. And in that return, humanity is forced to see itself not as master, but as guest. When years begin to stretch beyond the blackout, memories blur. The first days of panic, the weeks of hunger, the long silence of the cities, all remain vivid to those who lived through them. But for children born into the darkness, those stories already feel like legend. The auroras that once lit the skies in unnatural colours are spoken of with the same awe as ancient miracles. And slowly, the solar flare that reset civilization begins to slip from history into myth. People whisper around fires of the day the sun grew angry. They tell of skies that bled crimson, of towers that fell dark, of machines that screamed once and then died. To the young, it sounds less like science and more like punishment, a tale of arrogance met with divine judgment. The elders may try to explain, particles, magnetism, currents, but their words are brittle against the poetry of myth. What lives in memory is not physics, but fire. It is not the first time humanity has done this. Long before telescopes and satellites, civilizations told stories of the sun as a being, not a star. In Egypt, Ra sailed his burning bark across the sky each day, battling serpents of chaos to keep the world alive. In Japan, Amaterasu, goddess of the sun, once hid herself in a cave, plunging the world into darkness until the gods lured her out again. Among the Inca, Inti was worshipped as the source of warmth and harvest, his temples filled with offerings of gold to honor his brilliance. In each story, the sun was not just light, it was power, personality, judgment. Now, in a world reset by fire from the sky, those old myths feel alive again. Some communities begin to hold rituals at dawn, bowing to the first rays as if in gratitude for another day of light. Others fear sunset, whispering prayers that the sun will rise again. The scientific memory of solar flares becomes entangled with older truths, that the sun is more than energy, it is presence. Legends sprout in every village. In one, people say the auroras were the fingers of a god reaching down to test humanity. In another, they claim the darkness came because humans had grown too proud, forgetting their place beneath the stars. Still others believe the sun's fire was not punishment, but cleansing, a way of burning away the rot of greed and excess so that something purer might grow. What begins as story becomes culture. Children are taught to respect the dawn, to plant seeds with the sunrise, to tell time by the shadows it casts. Festivals form around solstices, marking the turning of light and darkness with drums and fire. In the absence of global calendars, the sun becomes once again the measure of all things, the first clock, the oldest god, the eternal watcher. There are skeptics, of course. Some cling fiercely to the old knowledge, guarding scraps of books, fragments of data, insisting that what happened was not divine but natural. Yet even they cannot stop the tide of myth. For myth is not bound by fact. Myth is how humanity gives shape to fear, to wonder, to the unknowable. And when the blackout erased the language of science from daily life, myth became the natural tongue again. It is strange, perhaps, how quickly the wheel turns. A century ago, people laughed at the ancients for worshipping the sun. They called it superstition, ignorance. But now, with no satellites to watch flares, no scientists to issue warnings, no grids to collapse and explain, the sun has reclaimed its old place as mystery, as deity, as force beyond measure. Imagine standing at dawn in a small community, watching as villagers gather in silence. The horizon glows red. Children hush, elders raise their hands. And as the sun crests the land, a murmur rises, not of worship as once defined, but of reverence. For here is the source of warmth, the guardian of crops, the bringer of morning, and somewhere deep in every heart lingers the memory of the day it burned too brightly and reset the world. Perhaps in some distant future, when civilization rises again, scholars will look back on this age and read its myths. They will hear of the great fire in the sky, of the long darkness, of the tribes that bowed to the dawn. And they may wonder if these were allegories, exaggerations, poetic dreams. Yet we who stand in the shadow of the blackout would know. These stories, like the ones of Ra, Amaterasu, and Inti, are not inventions. They are memories clothed in symbol. And in that sense, myth is not less true than history. Myth is simply memory's way of surviving when words are not enough. The years roll on, and the blackout is no longer a moment of crisis, but the shape of the world itself. For those who remember, there is always a before and after, a line drawn in light. Before, there were screens and satellites, skyscrapers glowing through the night. After, there is silence, firelight, and the long rhythm of seasons. For those born into it, though, there is no before. There is only this world, stitched together from fragments, carried by memory, sustained by the stubborn will to endure. Civilization has not vanished, it has changed. Cities no longer define the heart of humanity, villages do. Knowledge no longer travels instantly across the globe. It moves slowly, by word of mouth, by journeys on foot, by the rare spark of radio static between survivors who still coax power from the ruins. Power structures are no longer national, but local. Tribes and lords, councils and communities. The world has become smaller and in some ways older, yet it breathes. In the quiet of these new days, a truth begins to settle. What happened was not unique. The sun has always been both life-giver and destroyer. Floods, fires, ice ages, comets. The earth has been reset countless times. Civilizations have risen, glittered for an age, and fallen back into dust. Ours was no exception. Perhaps it was arrogance to believe we were immune, that technology had lifted us beyond the reach of cycles older than history. Perhaps collapse was never an end, but only another turn of the wheel. And so people begin to ask different questions. Not how do we return to what was lost, but what should we build now? Some dream of rebuilding the old world exactly as it was. Power grids, cities, machines. Others whisper that the old world was flawed, too fragile, too dependent, too blind to its own limits. Maybe, they suggest, this reset was also a chance to live slower, to honour the soil, to remember that light is precious, not guaranteed. At dawn, children play in fields that were once parking lots. At night, stories are told of the great fire in the sky. In those stories, humanity is not victim but survivor. The sun tested us, and though we stumbled, we endure. The myths that rise from this age will carry forward, woven with both fear and reverence, until some future generation builds anew and tells itself, as we once did, that collapse could never happen again. But the truth remains. It can. It will. Solar flares are not rare. They are part of the living breath of our star. Another storm will come, whether in decades or centuries, and once more the world may tremble. The question is not whether resets happen. The question is how prepared we are when they arrive. Imagine it. Tomorrow morning, you wake to see the sun climbing over the horizon. Its light feels the same as always. Warm, steady, eternal. But so it felt before the last storm. So it has felt to every civilization before ours, before theirs, stretching back through ages we cannot count. The sun does not need to change for us to forget. It only needs to remind us once in a while that our lives, our machines, even our memories are temporary guests beneath its fire. And so we are left with a choice, whispered by the silence of the blackout and the myths born after it. Do we live as though the sun will always be gentle? Or do we live as though tomorrow's sunrise might carry the spark that resets us again? Perhaps in the end, the lesson of the blackout is not despair, but humility. We are not masters of the earth, nor of the heavens. We are part of a cycle, fragile yet enduring, brief yet recurring, and if tomorrow the sun were to flare once more, if the lights were to die again forever, what would matter most would not be our machines, but our memories, our skills, our bonds with one another. The sun rises. It will always rise. But one day it may rise differently. One day it may remind us again how small we are beneath its endless fire. And so I leave you with this question, gentle listener, as the night deepens around you. If tomorrow your phone went dark and never lit again, if the world of wires and signals vanished with the dawn, how would you live? What would you carry into the silence? And what kind of world would you help to rebuild after the reset?